there's something you want more detail about, if there's a word I use that you don't understand, wave at me. And I will say, you in the back, and we'll talk about it. One of the things that I think is really, really interesting about what you're doing here is the fact that it is so incredibly open-ended. And part of what I'm going to talk about today, and come back to talk to you about, and come back and talk to you about, and kind of puzzle out with you, is how you make sense of the kind of data that's coming to you. So what you're going to hear from me today is a slightly different take on thinking about data, information, stuff, than you might have had in sort of more traditional science class, or if any of you are taking the statistics class or done the statistics portion of your maths class. It's a slightly different take on things. It's a different vocabulary, and it's a much more, I think, user-friendly way to do work. The other thing I'm going to tell you in true confession, this is what I do. This is how I do my work. What I study is, and the way I got to know all these wonderful people, is I study school improvement. I'm a former elementary, middle school, high school teacher that quit doing that, went and got a doctorate, and I spent my life, the last 20 years of my life, looking at what makes schools better. And the way I define better is schools that meet your learning needs and doing it in a way that keeps you engaged and motivated and focused. And so your project is like endlessly interesting to me because it answers sort of the question about how well are we doing that. So let's get going. First thing I want you to do is I want you to take a minute here or two and just think, and if you're taking notes you can write it down, and if not, you can just think in your head, what do you want to know out of today? Why, you know, you're here because you have to be. You're listening to me because you're told you were going to be listening to me. But what is it that you want to get out of this? Take a moment and identify that for yourself. That's good. And if you're done with that, take a minute and think about your favorite meal. And then again, write down, or at least list in your head, 3 to 5 characteristics about your favorite meal, which is a much easier question than what you want to learn from today.
To write, you use your hand.
I said that you think. So while you're thinking, first one first. Anybody have a good answer for that first bullet? What do you want to get out of this? Flipping your pen, or is that a statement? That's okay. Yes?
Being able to better analyze data.
Cool. Being able to better analyze data, because that's ultimately one of the big pieces. We're going to get to that. What I'm not going to give you today is sort of a how-to manual, because part of the really wonderful thing and also the really frustrating thing about what you're about to do is, if it were easy, it would already be done. But it's going to give you some ways to think about it. So good. Anybody else?
Information needed to make this project successful.
Yeah, it's a really good one. What do you need to do to make this work? Because you can identify making it work on a number of levels. If you just get lots of videos, you can count this as working. You know, if you get lots of hits on your videos, you can count this as working. And that in and of itself is a pretty amazing thing, really, if you think about a group of you folks in Lakewood High School being able to, in Lakewood, Ohio, being able to get something that might be very cool on the web, that's a lot to be said for it. However, if you can take it from there and say, as a group, what do these videos tell us about our community, our schools, our schooling, our society, the things that we make people do, that could even be a better payoff. Hopefully we're going to get you to that other one. What else are you here for today? Or might be here for today? I ask that because it's generally helpful when you go into a classroom to have some sense of what you want to get out the door. And this is the only time I'll ever say this, but in all honesty, when you go to college, walking into a class like that and saying, these are the 2 or 3 things I need to walk out of this room knowing, you're going to get a far better educational experience than if you don't. And it also kind of works for high school too, right? It works for learning no matter what. So let's go back to the better one. Favorite meal, 3 to 5 characteristics. I already called on you.
My mom's homemade macaroni.
Mom's homemade macaroni. Why? What are your characteristics?
She uses the shell noodles, breadcrumbs. There's lots of cheese and it's baked in the oven.
So we've got a particular noodle type. We got the crunchiness from the breadcrumbs, and we've got, what about the cheeses? You didn't mention cheese.
Is that extra cheese?
Extra cheese. Okay. So we've got mom's mac and cheese. Somebody else. Way in the back. Tell me about your mom's homemade ravioli. She'd be pleased to know you're willing to publicly announce that. So there's time, there's effort, there's, may I even go as far as to say the love that goes into each one. Cool. Okay. Somebody over here had a hand up.
Oh, steak quesadilla.
Say more.
The cheesiness inside and the juiciness of the steak and the freshness of the guac.
Fresh guac, juicy steak, ooey cheesy goodness.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. In the blue in the back. Sorry. I'll eventually learn who you are, hopefully.
My mom's spaghetti.
Here's your moment. Make your mom proud.
Smell the spiciness, the sauce, and the noodles.
Care to share more about the noodles or that per person? Okay. Somebody else.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I like, well, I get wheat bread, so the peanut butter with the wheat bread is really good, and then I like the way the jelly tastes with it because I just love the way it tastes, and then like when I toast it, it's all like gooey and it just tastes.
So it's the smooth, creamy or smooth? Or creamy, not crunchy rather? Okay. So you've got the texture of the toast, you got the texture of the peanut butter, you got kind of the sweetness of all of that. Yeah, she's not.
I can taste it.
I can taste it. Exactly. Okay. You all have something going on in your head, right? I will tell you that I do that. We're going to unpack this in a second. I use this exact same thing. I teach qualitative research to graduate students. This is the exact same thing I start with them with. This is a great way to start thinking about the way people think about what's important to them. Go home, try this on your own. What you're going to find out is you're going to get a variety of different kinds of stories, which we got here. And I just randomly chose folks, right? So what you remember is, in some cases, the way things tasted, the textures of them, the experience of having that. Now, none of you said this, but my guess is your mom isn't making ravioli every day. It's probably something that happens kind of infrequently because it's time intensive, because it's labor intensive. How often does your mom make mac and cheese?
Maybe like once every couple months.
Makes it special. How often do you get to enjoy the creamy goodness of your peanut butter sandwich?
Okay.
And the quesadilla experience, how often?
Once a month.
Okay, so part of what's going on here is what makes something favorite for people conjures up a whole bunch of different ways of telling the story. I've done this with a lot of people. I've done this with graduate students. I just did a thing out at the med school in Woodstown with teaching med students how to do this kind of stuff. And I get a variety of answers to this. It doesn't matter who it is, so go out and try this. What you find out, though, is that these ways of thinking about this are intensely personal for most people. It's no mistake that you talked about your mom, you talked about your mom, you talked about your mom. Other people talk about their grandparents, particularly when I do this with adults. I get a lot of stories about what their grandparent did when they were your age, making bread with their grandmother or making soup or something. You get that intergenerational piece that becomes so important as people get older. But there's some universal themes that come out of this too. Generally, how it tastes. Nobody's ever chosen a favorite meal in the time that I've done this that they didn't like. Everybody has some sensory mouthfeel tasting thing, whether it's sweet or salty or spicy. It's a way in which there are some universal things, some things everybody thinks about. When you're